Decides 2020. This is a live broadcast. You can listen live online, wadr.org, and follow live updates on Twitter at WADR News. Côte d'Ivoire Decides 2020.
Good afternoon and welcome to a live coverage of the Ivorian elections on the West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar. I am Deborah Amuwo, and next to me is
Adolphus Mawula.
Thank you so much for joining us. Assisting us behind the scenes are my colleagues Imo Edet as well as Abdul Rahman Dia. Thank you for tuning in and you are welcome.
And so it's nearly 3 hours or less than 3 hours to the closing of voting there in Côte d'Ivoire. Some 7.5 million registered voters have been out and about since this morning, casting their ballots for about 4 candidates, including incumbent Alassane Ouattara. They are casting their votes, for a president who will be in power for the next couple of years. But 2 of the 4 candidates in the race announced a boycott of the election long before today's date and encouraged their supporters to exercise a civil disobedience, meaning they should do anything they could to disrupt the election from taking place. They say Mr. Ouattara's participation in the election is illegal and unconstitutional. Côte d'Ivoire goes to the polls amid deep-seated divisions connected to the 2010-2011 post-election violence, in which over 3,000 people were killed, according to the United Nations. What's at stake for national unity, peace, and reconciliation? We will explore these and many more issues confronting the nation as we bring you updates from polling stations across the country and elsewhere in the sub-region. That's Côte d'Ivoire Decides, right here on the West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting in Dakar on 94.9 FM.
And our first stop is Abidjan, the political capital of Côte d'Ivoire. With less than 3 hours to the end of voting, we speak to journalist Felix Boni about the political atmosphere in the city. Thank you for joining us, Felix.
The atmosphere is very different from one place to another place. If you go to Abobo, for instance, Abobo, which is one of the places favorable to Mr. Ouattara, it is a natural bastion for Mr. Ouattara. You will find that situation the things happen more calmly in Abobo, but it's not the same atmosphere in some other areas dominated by opponents like Kukudi and some other places. We noticed that demonstrators has blocked the
roads,
the votes, and they broke the election, the polling materials.
Destroy voting materials.
Yes, the polling materials, and they destroy all the polling materials and burn the ballot boxes, and the security forces cannot do anything. They just assist them, and election is not happened in all the
districts across the country.
Yes,
and
so,
the government had deployed 35.
In some areas also within the country, in the north things very calmly in the north, but in some areas like in the east, center, or west, it is very difficult because people has blocked the road. They prevent election material from reaching the destination, and in many localities, especially those of the opponents, are not currently accessible.
The government had announced the deployment of 35,000 security forces to mend and protect today's vote. Why are they remaining calm? Is there any explanation as to why, despite the destruction of voting materials, they are not intervening, as you said.
But you have to notice that these forces has not been able to reach all these places. The roads are blocked. People block the road with they cut trees and they use even the big huge cars to block roads. So there are not any roads for all the security forces to reach the polling places in the country. But even when they are present in some areas, we notice that the security forces we notice that they are very calm, and we haven't noticed any clash with demonstrators in the areas.
They are avoiding any confrontation with the protesters.
No confrontation.
And
they are very calm. Yes.
And what
the situation.
Great. What about the communities? Because before now, we have been hearing reports that some communities were at loggerheads. They've targeted each other. So far, what do we know about that? Especially in areas where maybe the opposition might have a stronghold, but also where there might be people from other regions living who are in support of the government.
You want to say what's happened in the area where the opponent has more stronghold?
Yes, I mean in some communities where they have where the opposition and the government might have equal numbers, and one group is trying to prevent the election from taking place. So far, have there been reports of violence?
No, in like Yamoussoukro, in the area where I live, for instance. The members of the ruling parties, supporters, electors has gone to vote. They went to vote, no problem. And the opponent supporters has stay home, but didn't go to the polling places. But the day is not finished. We hear that in the afternoon it will happen a lot of things because the opponents. Demonstrators want to block the polling materials after the vote. So we haven't finished with this day. A lot of things can happen again before this afternoon. So we are waiting to know what will happen after.
So as the evening fades into dusk and darkness, what are the fears? Do people feel afraid, especially in areas where you have been, about what could possibly happen?
Yes, people feel very afraid about what will happen this afternoon or in this night. And even tomorrow after the election, people are asking themselves what will happen after this 31 October. What will happen after today, tomorrow, the 1st November, after tomorrow, and so on. So people are very afraid of what will happen because we hear that it is possible that the opponents organize themselves and create a new government with all the political parties members of this coalition of opposition. It means that it is possible that we will have two governments going from tomorrow and the other days.
Well, but the two members of the opposition are boycotting. So why might they be planning on that? But anyway, you said that it's all speculated.
They have made a boycott because they stay making a boycott because they think that they have to. They are the leaders of the opposition at this moment, and they think that it is a strategy for them to bring Mr. Wadr to go to discussion, to dialogue, and they didn't get this dialogue. So
they want to continue to undermine the process.
In the process with the other member of the opposition, and I hear what I'm saying. I hear that it is possible that this group of opposition create a new government after this 31st October. They say that after today, Mr. Wadr is not president again, and the government will stop today. And after going from tomorrow, they are able to make a new government with some names. I have some names, but I prefer
not to name them, not to announce them here. And finally, before we take leave of you, Felix, what is it that the civil society is saying? What is it that civil society organizations in the country are saying regarding the trend of political events in the country?
You know, we have civil society is very divided in Cote d'Ivoire. I don't know if we have a civil society here, but I call them political society because they are these kind of civil societies. Some of them support the opposition, the other one support the ruling party. So it is a civil society which is very interested. But we noticed that some of them went with the ruling party. They support the situation for them. It is normal that the election is held today because it is the date of the election. But for the others members, the condition of the
elections
election are not gathered. So it means that we have to discuss to find the condition, equalities of condition for all the
candidates
before going to election. So we have these two position in civil society.
That was Felix Boni, Ivorian journalist, reporting about the situation in that country. Felix said that polling centers in some areas did not open, especially in opposition stronghold, and that in some parts of the country polling materials were destroyed by supporters, by some people I should say, because in some areas people are staying away because the opposition has said that they should boycott. And so we will keep an eye on that situation in our subsequent broadcast. But we will remain in Abidjan to speak to Benjamin Tete, who's in the community of Kokode. Thank you again for joining us. Good evening, Benjamin.
Good evening. Good evening.
Great. Tell us what has happened. Earlier this morning, you reported that polling centers in that part of Abidjan were closed. So what's happening this afternoon? Have they started, have they opened and people are now casting their ballots?
Well, earlier this afternoon, between 1 and 2, I received a call that polling centers, because initially we have 3 different areas that were used for registration in Rivera 2. There's a place called Rivera Nono in Kokodi. And then later I went over. These places are open but practically empty. This morning, people struggle, even going just to buy some food. I think I went to one of the bakeries in my area, which people struggle, and there was very long queue. So this really, people were afraid. But people are trying to maybe go out now and find something and to pick up and then go back home. People are very much skeptical because this situation is a bit, how do I call it, serious in some of the community. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Now, with the streets, are the streets occupied, filled with people and kids playing out? Because at least after several hours, that initial fear that they had is fading away, or they're just still sticking around home?
People are still sticking around home because I went to one of the supermarkets, not far from my end, but this place is still closed down, and particularly the road. You can just see a few taxis who are trying to go about and maybe picking up 1 or 2 persons, but in fact, Abidjan is really in a fear, especially where I lived. Yes.
Okay, Benjamin, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
That was journalist Benjamin Tibe reporting there from Kokode in Abidjan, where earlier this morning voting had been delayed. But as you heard, people are gradually going out to vote. But there is fear. People are afraid of what possibly could happen because the events leading to today's date have not been so favorable, and so because of that, people are skeptical about what's going to happen. Seems pretty much that while the country is deciding on a new president, some quarters. In some quarters of the country, there's this deep-seated fear.
And it is understandable because of Côte d'Ivoire's past, of course. The last time in 2010, not the last time, but in 2010 when there were elections, the violence killed so many people and so many people lost their lives. And I think there is this general fear that because of the amount of publicity, media coverage and noise that this election has made before today with President Alassane Ouattara running for a third term, people are really concerned that the same thing will happen. And it's almost like the same figures, right? The same key figures who are playing the same scene.
They've been in the political theater for many decades.
And they're back again for another election. And I think most Ivorians are just trying to stay alive, really, and to make sure that nothing escalates.
Yes, absolutely, because following the violence of 2010-2011, until now, some people have been prosecuted, but others have not been prosecuted. And what you can sense is that it's like everyone is holding on to their position. Let's say Ouattara came to power on the back of some violence, and Gbagbo had to be taken to The Hague to answer to charges of crimes against humanity. He was acquitted, and I mean the posture that he exhibited that made some people, some of his citizens, to turn against him. It appears in the wisdom of some people, some Ivorians, that Ouattara is adopting a similar posture. Of course, not like
history is repeating itself.
But he had advocated for democracy, and constitutional democracy. And at the end of his second term, when people expected that he would be leaving,
he said he wouldn't run for a third term.
He made a U-turn when his hand-picked successor, Prime Minister Amadou Gon Coulibaly, died.
Yes.
And he told the world that he was consulting with the party because he had declared that he didn't want to run. And suddenly he declared that he wanted to run. So I think that anger from the other side of the political divide drives them, to say, we also will have to hold on.
Right.
You stood for this principle, and today you can't be the one to violate the laws. But the argument from the ruling party is that we changed the constitution, and the people voted that we should, reset the clock on term limit. And so Mr. Ouattara is eligible to contest. So it seems this is going to be a long-running or a long-seated political encounter that Ivorians will have to deal with, but by extension the sub-region, West Africa.
It definitely seems like it. And as we mentioned just now, Mr. Laurent Gbagbo was at The Hague, and he did have to, defend himself, and he was acquitted. Him together with Blake Goudet. Yeah. And
he was the Minister of Youth in the government
during the time of Gbagbo. And Laurent Gbagbo did, his supporters did attempt to get him involved in these elections without success. And he recently gave an interview to the television TV5 Monde and said a few comments. And we've caught up with his spokesperson, Mr. Justin Kone Katina, and he's been sharing with us a little bit about why, first of all, he's still in exile all the way in Accra, Ghana, but also Laurent Gbagbo's thoughts about these elections and the hopes that they have going into them. So let's hear more from Mr. Kone Katina Justin. You are the spokesman of Mr. Laurent Gbagbo and in political exile, I understand.
Exactly.
All right. Can you just tell us a little bit about why you're in exile, first of all? Why do you fear going back?
I'm in exile since 2011, and because I'm not safe in Ivory Coast. After we have been overthrown, President Gbagbo has been overthrown in 2011. Many of his allies fled the country, and I'm right now in Accra with more than in exile. And a lot of them in many countries. They are scattered in many countries in Africa and Europe. So it's in 2011 having been in exile.
Right, and I would really like to know what do these elections mean to Mr. Gbagbo's supporters, team, allies? What do these elections mean?
Yeah, according to the last televised interview he's done, for him, the election should be postponed and there should be a negotiation. So there should be a transition from now to a defined period where they will set up a transition which will lead to transparent and fair elections.
That is to say, Mr. Gbagbo thinks these elections are not fair and transparent.
Yes, that is the impression we have from the televised interview he granted last Thursday on the TV5 mode.
Oh, yes, but right now the elections are ongoing and they're taking place, and before we know it, there might be results. What do you think is happening right now in Cote d'Ivoire? What do you think the expectations and the atmosphere is for especially the young people of Cote d'Ivoire?
Okay. In Cote d'Ivoire, as of yesterday, there were some troubles, but as we stand, Abidjan itself is very calm. People who want to vote are coming out to vote, and we have a lot of troubles in Yamoussoukro, Prikro, Abanguru, and Daoukro. Those are places where the strongholds of PDCI earlier, Mr. Bedie's stronghold.
Right, and if the elections, do come to an end and results are announced, do you think things will stay calm in Cote d'Ivoire?
Yes, that one we can't predict, but from what we have heard this morning from one of the ministers we spoke to this morning, was every measure is being put in place to calm the population, in fact, to have a very decent environment, a very decent outcome.
If Mr. Ouattara is re-elected president, what will be the next move of Mr. Gbagbo and his team?
From the televised interview he gave, he wants a dialogue to be set up. So we think that if Mr. Alassane, the President Alassane, is re-elected, he might look into those suggestions Gbagbo made last time and then try to fetch a friendly or patriotic state from it.
As Ivorians home and abroad today, October 31, cast their ballots, the Ivorian embassy in the Senegalese capital, Dakar, registered a mass turnout of voters coming to exercise their fundamental human rights as enshrined in the constitutions all over the world. More than 3,500 voters for this. There are more than 3,500 registered voters here in Senegal participating in these elections. The Ivorian ambassador to Senegal, Touré Sekou, alongside other electorate, earlier cast their ballots. Elsewhere at the King Fahd Palace, a condition of coalition of opposition parties in Senegal, including the PDCI and FPR, held a press conference tagged "No Third Term Mandate." The meeting is to re-echo their boycott of the elections in their homeland, Cote d'Ivoire. Recall, two major opposition and presidential candidates announced a boycott of the election following the incumbent President Alassane Ouattara's third-term candidacy. However, the question is, would the boycott have an impact on the elections and the results? Rafaya Z, FPR's representative of the former ruling party, Ivorian or Ivorian Popular Front Party, and a spokesman for the coalition of the opposition political parties, said that Ouattara's political ambition has tainted the democratic tenets of the country. Let's hear him.
It is important to boycott because we don't agree with the process. When you have process, there are steps in the process, and each step must be done as with certain ruler. We say, and you don't do what you say. It is important for us to respect what is written in our fundamental law.
Now, regardless of the boycott, the election is holding in Senegal, in Ghana, and back home in Cote d'Ivoire. What impact will this have on the election and the results in all?
When you say the world election, if there is election, you can speak about election. But for us, there is no election. There is no election. You cannot speak after election what will happen, because you see many things with the media before the day we have to vote. You see many things, irregular things, we cannot see.
As we know, the election is holding, regardless the action of the opposition. What will be the reaction of the opposition after the elections?
Well, you see, at midnight today, after midnight, normally you don't have any president. Then you will organize for the next, and it can take a transition form. And after, because in the constitution there is some ruler which precise this. Then we have a certain a number of days we have to organize it, and after we do election as everybody wants.
Between 2010 and 2011, over 3,000 people died during the electoral crisis in Cote d'Ivoire. Is the coalition of opposition parties considering the aftermath of this election taking place today?
No. What happened in 2010? It is different than what is happening today, because there was a president, and we see how the election was and how the international community deal to put someone on like a president. We see. I don't think it will happen like we see in 2010.
This week alone, the UN, United Nations, the ICC, all called for calm among the political actors in Cote d'Ivoire. Just on Thursday, the ECOWAS electoral mission deployed 90 observers to Cote d'Ivoire to oversee the election.
If there was a sincere, normally, before the date we come, they must sit and discuss. But never, Mr. Wadr don't want to sit down and discuss.
But the ECOWAS mission weeks ago sent for a dialogue between the government and the political oppositions.
When we write our condition, they don't see our condition. They do other things than our condition. Our condition was clear about the CEI, Electoral Commission. It was clear. We are not present in that commission.
You remained passionate about your call, that is the boycott of the election. What is your last word to citizens, home and abroad, who have gone along with your announcement of the elections?
Yeah, it is to listen to the opposition, to see the road we are made and in what direction we can go. They have to listen to the opposition. Because the opposition now, it is not political parties. It is Ivorian, the very, very Ivorian. They like democracy, they like peace.
That was Justin Kone Katina, the spokesperson for former President Laurent Gbagbo and a political exile in Accra, Ghana. He has been talking about the issues in Cote d'Ivoire, what his party thinks and what former President Laurent Gbagbo thinks, and things that the government of the day must be doing in order to bring the country together to reconcile. And you are listening to a special coverage of the elections in Cote d'Ivoire here on West Africa Democracy Radio. I'm Adolphus Mawolo.
And I'm Deborah Amuwa. We have behind the scenes Imo Edet as well as technician Abdurrahman Dia. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the human rights situation in Cote d'Ivoire. As of July, some 16,000 people were detained within a prison system that's only designed for less than 9,000 people. There have also been many reports of prison guards and fellow inmates being taking advantage of detainees, and detainees also lacking adequate access to medical care and suffering extortion. There have also been calls on President Ouattara to be considerate of the freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. In fact, an opposition parliamentarian, Alain Lobongo, was sentenced to a year's imprisonment on January 29. It was eventually reduced to a 6-month suspended sentence, but that sentence was given to him because he allegedly disclosed fake news on his social media account after he expressed that police were planning to imprison an opposition mayor. There have also been many instances where opposition rallies were prohibited and multiple occasions where police and gendarmes arrested and detained opposition politicians as well as civil society activists. And now on the line with us to talk about what exactly is going on when it comes to human rights in Cote d'Ivoire, what has happened in the past and also in the recent weeks as the country prepared for elections. We have human rights activist Aisha Dabo of Africtivist. Thank you so much for joining us, Aisha.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. And we're talking Cote d'Ivoire. Of course, Cote d'Ivoire is voting today. Can we talk a little bit about the human rights situation in the country? Just looking at the past few years in Cote d'Ivoire under the leadership of President Alassane Ouattara.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. It has been after the crisis in the early 2000s and the crisis that followed in 2010, 2011. That's the post-electoral crisis between Gbagbo and Ouattara, each of them claiming victory. You know, many people died. There were at least 3,000 people who died. So after Ouattara was confirmed as the winner, there was some kind of a stability that gradually settled in, even though all issues, human rights issues, many human rights violations that happened during that period were not all addressed, and reconciliation was still going on. People were trying to go back to a normal life in a way, despite the wounds, despite everything. And it's rather unfortunate that the same person who, and also economic development in Cote d'Ivoire that has been hailed by many. It's unfortunate that president who was able to work towards that and building things would stand and risk everything, risk taking the country back to that crisis or even a crisis that will be worse than that, just because he feels that he doesn't have someone fit in his party to stand elections, so he wants a third term. It's unfortunate.
Right.
And as you said, there have been, since he announced his candidacy, there have been crises. Some people have died. Reports say at least 15 people have been killed. Human rights activists have been arrested. Opposition members or sympathizers have been arrested just because they want to protest against the third term. And since October, there was an arrêté that was passed and prohibiting any other, any kind of an assembly in the country except assemblies or meetings that will happen during the electoral period, which is an infringement on people's right for peaceful demonstration, peaceful protest, and freedom of expression, because it's just unbelievable that after all the country went through and he was, given an opportunity to open a new chapter in the country, that, Cote d'Ivoire is going through this crisis because of a personal ambition. And right now, today, not all polling stations have opened because some polling stations did not receive their ballot materials because the opposition has called for a boycott. So some areas have not voted at all because the materials were not there. Others have difficulties voting. There's low turnout. So people are more thinking about trying to save their lives. I was reading in the morning that many people have gotten out of Abidjan to go up country because they don't feel safe in the country. They think that there will be chaos. So it's rather unfortunate that we are leaving this situation just because human rights are not being upheld.
Right, and what is the expectation if Alassane Ouattara does win these elections? Will these things continue? Do you think? How will he be able to gauge the outpour of whether it be opposition saying no, whether it be citizens taking to the streets? How will he be able to keep the country at peace, which is the most important thing at the moment?
I think that's the most difficult thing for him right now, because the opposition that Bédié and Afingesa are expected to make a statement at 4 p.m. today. Alassane Ouattara already made his statement after voting, calling for calm and saying that youth should not be used as instruments. It will be very difficult for him if the opposition continues with this civil disobedience. Personally, I think civil disobedience can happen in a peaceful manner if they allow them to, because it's every citizen's right to express themselves, but peacefully. And right now, if there is crisis in Ivory Coast, it will affect the whole region. If you look at how many countries Ivory Coast is bordering, it's many countries.
Right.
And it will just the same with Guinea. Where people are still tense, actually. So you cannot just afford to have crisis happen. And people are still, I will go beyond Cote d'Ivoire and say it's not unfortunate, but it's really sad that after 60 years of independence, countries and citizens are still fighting for basic rights. You can have one and two issues, but you cannot just continuously fighting for something that is your right as a citizen in a country. And you have these leaders who every time come with new tricks. And this is like a trend of changing the constitution. And you still, what's paradoxical is that you still maintain in the constitution that you can't do more than 2 terms, but you still want to, go for a 3rd term, while that's illegal and contradictory. But for Cote d'Ivoire, we can only call for peace and call for restraint, especially security forces and the government, because the government and President Ouattara, because right now the ones who are still there, they should exercise restraint, because no one needs bloodshed, because all men are fighting over power from whichever camp. And the youth are the ones who are going to suffer most, because majority of the population is young people. So it's time to call for calm, and it's time to call for peace. And it's rather, again, I'm repeating myself, unfortunate that the international community, when I say international community, I'm not talking about outside the continent, I'm talking about inside the continent, be it ECOWAS, be it African Union. They let these situations rot. And now you try to come and, validate in a way a candidacy that's being challenged. And then you would come when there's a crisis, you set up a crisis committee, reconciliation, unity government, while from the onset you could have tried to solve that issue. And another way of encouraging head of state to leave power, because they tend to stick to it, is to give them a kind of an incentive. There are countries who have passed laws that will allow head of state to live a decent life after the presidency and encourage them to do things. But normally I don't think that should be done, but that's a way of telling them that there is a life after the presidency. And you shouldn't, risk even one person that dies because you want to stay longer in power is one person too many for me. And we should be, 60 years after independence, we should be thinking about how to develop countries, but not going back to the same election. Most crises in Africa happen before, during, and after elections. That's just unfortunate.
Thank you so much, Aisha, for taking out the time to speak to us. We'll have to cut it short right there. You had so much to share with us, and hopefully we can get to speak to you soon about the latest developments. Bye for now.
Thank you.
And it appears everyone is talking about the issues, human rights in particular, because every time there is violence, it's the ordinary people who suffer.
Of course.
When roadblocks are set up, poor ordinary people who will have to go out every day to fend for themselves, they wouldn't be able to do so. And when they stay home, they would rather starve. And if they can't, sometimes they risk going out. And then in the midst of violence
and
where
crime,
people,
that's how crime comes into play. And I think what Aisha was really saying is that Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire has been through so much.
Since 2000,
exactly,
since 2000,
since the early 2000s,
since 2000.
the country has been through so much, and she was just expressing how Alassane Ouattara in the beginning was a symbol of democracy and freedom and a new dawn.
Right.
And so she's expressing that disappointment in the fact that he's almost replaying the same film, the same movie, and now there's going to be an emergency call for peace. But how can he guarantee that things will not play out in the same way they did 10 years ago? Because people are being faced with the same situation, and the people are also expressing that same fear. And she mentioned how people are leaving the capital
and actually
to go up country.
Of
course it is,
because there is precedence.
Definitely,
of what happened.
They've seen it happen before, and maybe they didn't expect what happened before, and now they're telling themselves, we don't want to face that now. Let's be ahead of the game. And that's why people will migrate to other parts of the country, and that can definitely affect the economy of Cote d'Ivoire and so much more.
Absolutely. And then when you look at the African context, where politics is not centered sometimes around substantive issues of the economy, those related to health, those related to education. Sometimes you see that politics is centered around regionalism, if you like. It's centered around ethnicity. Who comes from this region? Who belongs to this religion? So these things.
It's simply division and rule tactic.
And that's why when elections are taking place in a country like Cote d'Ivoire that had experienced a violence, when people were targeted simply because they come from a particular region or they belong to a particular tribe. So you see people you call it shaking the table and allowing all of the elements on top of it to fall in place. So people who are in neighborhoods where they believe that they are among a group of people that their population can't be equated to, they will want to move to places where
it's definitely creating
protected.
Fear, and that fear is really dangerous, because at the end of the day, I think that's why many of our guests today have said they would not vote, or they are not going out to vote. I don't think it's all about a candidate. I think it's also about fear. Safety.
I remember we spoke to Adele Njore. She said that she's a former member of parliament, but also an executive of a political party. She doesn't want to go out before she is targeted, because today she doesn't know who's who
out there.
Yeah, right. So she's going to stay away. And the time is 18 minutes past 16 hours. It's less than 2 hours to the closing of polling in Cote d'Ivoire, and you are listening to a special coverage of the elections in Cote d'Ivoire on West Africa Democracy Radio with myself, Adolphus Mawolo.
And myself, Deborah Amuwo. And just for us to move on to the next phase, Aisha Dabo mentioned that Ouattara has been hailed for his economic contributions to the country.
Absolutely, in the sub-region and beyond, because since Ouattara took over in 2010, at the time when he took over, the economy was really struggling because following months of intense political debate, nasty politicking, businesses were scaling down their activities, and that really significantly impacted the revenue generation of the country. So when he came to power, he had to reboot the economy, attracting new investors to come. So since he took over, since 2010, Cote d'Ivoire's GDP has more than doubled from $25.4 billion to $58.8 billion last year, making it the fastest growing economy in West Africa. Growth since 2011 has been around 7 to 8% annually, driven especially by telecoms and other sectors or services, and supported by heavy infrastructure development, investment in electricity, roads, and drinking water. Agriculture remains a mainstay, especially cocoa, of which Cote d'Ivoire is the world's biggest producer with 40% of the market. Cocoa and its derivatives account for 15% of GDP, according to the World Bank. In August, Ouattara said his government had reversed the poverty curve, which is in clear decline. So we will now go on the live on the line to Accra and speak to
Mr. Finud Semevo Nazer.
Nazer. He's a businessman, and we're going to talk to him about the business climate in Cote d'Ivoire, how favorable it is for local and international business people. But let's begin by speaking to him about his participation in today's election. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Nazer. Mr. Nazer, are you there? Are you with us? We don't seem to be getting him, so we will keep trying. As soon as we get him, we will begin that conversation. So truly, Cote d'Ivoire has been a country, it's been a model for West Africa economically.
Definitely. Agriculture, they've taken advantage of that agricultural sector that many African countries, even though we are thriving or should be thriving in that sector, haven't been able to really take a hold of. And Cote d'Ivoire have found what works, and they've been able to use cacao production to create wealth for themselves. And also there have been so much lobbying for local farmers to actually be able to earn money for what they produce.
Especially, the cacao farmers, that has been the main focus for this government. And
they've been very successful.
Right, they've been working with Ghana, because Ghana is another leading producer. So they've been collaborating to set new prices for the sector's stakeholders, to make sure that they do not reap all of the benefits, but that people who are planting, people who are in the field, do benefit. And we can really also appreciate the efforts of human rights organizations, because in the past, there have been reports of children being used in the plantations, child labor I'm referring to. And so we have these activists who have been monitoring the situation, talking to the governments, but also raising the red flag that, hey, look, you're reaping all the billions of dollars. How you make your money is on the back of children who should be in school, who should be with their families, getting training, getting prepared, but instead they are 12, 13 years old, and you using them in the fields. So this is not right. So, they try to strike a balance, and the government is also playing along the way. And I should tell you, Deborah, when governments decide to lead their countries in a way that the country is peaceful, when citizens decide that they want to settle for peace, in peacetime, so many things can happen. Between 2010 to 2020, everyone is saying Cote d'Ivoire has done extremely, extremely well, because the growth rate has not declined so easily. It's been hovering around 7.8. So quite impressive for the people. And the fear now is that if the country degenerates because of violence,
that could affect all the work that has been done in the last 10 years, and in fact bring everything down, bringing the economy to its knees, which is rather unfortunate.
And it's a strategic location. Cote d'Ivoire is a strategic hub economically
in the region.
Also for some organizations trying to operate in this sub-region. International organizations trying to operate in this region. Some of them are headquartered in Cote d'Ivoire. So the fear is that if there's political violence, it's going to affect operations, not only for organizations, but for businesses. So that's why everyone is cautiously looking at what's going to happen, and hopefully hoping that the role ECOWAS, the African Union, and other organizations are playing will at least help to diffuse tensions and pacify the country, and have everyone sit around the negotiating table to resolve whatever outstanding issues that they will have. And our colleague Abdullahi Hassan has been out since this morning at the Ivorian embassy here in Dakar, monitoring the voting process, and he spoke to some people, and we will be joining him shortly to get the very latest from him about what's happening at that polling center. As soon as we can get hold of Abdullahi Hassan, we will begin that conversation. back to while we try to link up with Abdullahi Hassan. We will bring you the profiles of some of the candidates. So let's begin with Henry Konan Bédié. Bédié was Cote d'Ivoire's president from 1993 to 1999. At 86 years of age, he was counted out by some who expected his PDCI Democratic Party of Cote d'Ivoire to name a younger presidential candidate this year. But Bédié won the PDCI's nomination with more than 99% support from party delegates. His strength in the political election remains to be seen, although he is widely considered the biggest threat to Ouattara's re-election. And I should say again that he is boycotting the PDCI, the party of Ivory Coast, or I should say Cote d'Ivoire's founding president Felix Houphouët-Boigny has been locked out of power since a 1999 military coup that overthrew Bédié. He and Pascal Affingessan called for a boycott of the election at a joint press conference in Abidjan on October 15.
And Pascal Affingessan is 67 years old. He is the nominee of Gbagbo's Ivorian Popular Front Party. He was also Prime Minister from 2000 to 2003 during Gbagbo's presidency. And following the brief civil war that erupted in 2010 when Gbagbo refused to stand down after the Electoral Commission declared Ouattara the winner of the election, Affingessan was arrested and placed under a house arrest until his release in 2013. And he in fact came second behind Ouattara in the 2015 election with 9.2% of the vote.
Now we have our colleague Abdullahi Hassan on the line. Good afternoon, Abdullahi.
Good afternoon, Adolphus. I'm happy to be back online with you again.
Great. What's the latest from the polling center where you are?
Well, Mr. Adolphus, so far what we have is that the number of voters is gradually dropping because I believe from the most half of the morning down to like midday, we had voters in their hundreds, trooping in to cast their vote. So I believe that much later in the day, not that later, but I guess in the next 1 hour or so, counting should begin. However, I left the embassy to the King Fahad Palace Hotel, where a coalition of opposition political parties comprising of the FPI, the PDCI, and other smaller parties who have representatives in Senegal, the Gambia, Mauritania, and Cape Verde all came together to announce their displeasure over the conduct of elections today and standing firm, with the announcement made by the two major opposition political presidential candidates, rather, that elections should that their supporters should boycott the elections.
Okay, Abdullahi, thank you for that update.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great. And we have come to the end of this broadcast. This is West Africa Democracy Radio, our special coverage of the elections in Cote d'Ivoire. I am Adolphus Mawolo.
And my name is Deborah Amuwo. A big thank you to Imo Edet, who was a producer of this edition, as well as technician Abdurrahmandia. Make sure to stay tuned to 94.9 FM as we continue to cover the Cote d'Ivoire elections. We still have a few more editions for you in both English and French.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This Saturday, October 31, 2020, Cote d'Ivoire elect a new head of state from 4 contenders, now to only